All right, guys, what's going on? So today we're going to be talking about mind-muscle connection, okay, and what that is, and basically just the idea of taking your workouts and changing them from being more movement-specific to more muscle-specific, okay? And so what I mean by that, it's more so that if you're someone that wants to build muscle and not necessarily just go through movements, this is going to kind of show you how to change your exercise a little bit to be a little bit more focused on actually working the muscle and building that muscle. So first thing to understand is the body is very good at making things efficient, okay? Efficiency is what it's meant to do. So it wants to use the least amount of effort to get a movement accomplished, okay? Whereas when you're training to build muscle, that's the exact opposite of what we want to do. We want to make things inefficient and make things as challenging as possible, make them harder on purpose to kind of create that stimulus for growth, because that's really what building muscle is. It's providing a stimulus, telling the muscle that it needs to grow through time under tension, load, mechanical stress. Okay, and that's really what the goal is. So the idea I want to talk about first is really just the bicep example. So if you take your arm and you're standing at your side and you just I told you to pull your hand up to your shoulder. And you can do this with me and just pull it up and then let it relax. You probably didn't feel much at all because again, your body knows that the task at hand is to bring the arm up and then extend. So flex and extend at the elbow. All right, and it's gonna do that with as little effort as possible. Whereas if I told you to bring your hand up and then squeeze your bicep as hard as you can, if you're someone that's good at contracting a muscle, you should get to the point where you're almost cramping in that muscle. And now if I kept that and then lowered my arm down while keeping that tension the entire time and then coming up, that's already way harder than it was to just passively move my arm, okay? Now, if we take that same movement, we put a dumbbell in my hand and add a load, add a stress, and now do that same thing, contracting, well, now we're creating that stimulus for growth. And if I put that same weight in the hand and I just said move your arm through that plane of motion, yeah, it would still put a load on the muscle, it would still give you a challenge, but you wouldn't get nearly as much out of it as you would if you were actually focusing on contracting that muscle. Okay, so it's important to understand first, when you're doing a movement, you have to understand all the moving parts and what muscles are working to make those movements happen, okay? And then by knowing that, you can kind of gear your training more towards them. Okay, so I'm gonna go through a few exercise examples of these and kind of show you how you can manipulate your exercise and how you can actually focus on each muscle, each moving part, and actually get that working. All right, so we're gonna have Dylan jump in here and show you guys some of our body weight exercises, okay? The first one we're gonna start with is the push-up. Okay, so before he goes onto the ground, we're going to show you it standing up just so you can understand the moving parts here. We have three main muscles that we want to kind of focus on here, and that's going to be the pec or the chest muscle, the shoulder, the anterior deltoid, okay, that's going to be the front of the shoulder, and then the triceps, which is that back part of the arm. Okay, so when we do a push-up, each one of those muscles is going to be doing a different movement. So the tricep is working to extend the elbow when we do a push-up. The deltoid is going to be working to flex the shoulder and bring it forward. And then the pec muscles, the chest muscles, are working to horizontally adduct the shoulder or bring those upper arms across the body, okay? So understanding that, we can go down into that push-up position, and now we can work each muscle independently. They're all gonna be working at the same time. You can't take any out of the equation because it is a compound movement, but we can still make a focus on each one. So to focus on the pecs here, on the chest muscle, when we're coming up and out of that push-up position from the bottom, we wanna be thinking about bringing the arms across the body. The hands are gonna stay locked or planted into the ground. But when we come up, we're thinking about pulling those elbows in and across the body. So he's gonna come down, and as he presses up, he's thinking about bringing his arms toward each other. Okay, and you can probably feel the shifting of the floor as he's pulling his hands on there, creating that friction, and then squeezing his pecs at the top. That's gonna make it a little bit more focused on the chest. Whereas if we want to focus more on the triceps, what he can do here is actually bring his hand position a little bit more narrow and then keep those arms in glued tight to the sides of his body. Okay, by doing this, he's putting more of an accentuation on the elbow and he's going to get a little bit more flexion, and then that way when he extends through, he can focus more on those triceps. And again, understand the tricep is working to straighten that arm. He can be putting his mind there, squeezing that muscle as hard as he can through that movement and contracting a little bit better. Okay, the shoulders, they're still working to flex those arms, so we can still think of it that way when we come up, thinking about extending as we come down, stretching at the bottom, and then flexing the arms by pushing up and through and then focusing on the front part of those shoulders. However, that's typically not an issue because the shoulders will tend to take over when you have weak chest or tricep muscles. So that's usually not one that we need to focus on in the push-up, but just so you understand the different moving parts there. All right, our next one we're going to go into is the squat. We're also going to talk about the split squat because they kind of go hand in hand. But in the squat, the main muscles we're going to be working here are going to be the quads and the glutes. So the quads are going to be here in the front part of the body, the front of the legs, front of the thighs, and then the glutes are going to be the muscles of your butt. Okay, they're going to be behind you, posterior there. Okay, and so how this works now, the quads have two movements here. They work to both extend at the knee, okay, that's when you straighten the leg, and they also work to extend the hips, okay, coming all the way up and through. Now, the glutes are also working to extend the hips, okay, and that is going to be their sole purpose there. So what we're going to do here, when we go into that squat, we're going to push the hips back, bend at the knees, come down as low as we can. We're going to be stretching both the glutes and the quads at the same time, and then both will contract as we come all the way up. So again, we're squeezing that glute as we come up and through, we're squeezing those quads, and then slowly lowering back down. Again, if we want to focus one or the other, remember the hips are mainly driven by the glutes. So by squeezing the butt at the top and through that movement, we're going to be getting a lot more emphasis on there when we're moving those hips. And if we want to focus more on the quads, we're going to be focusing a little bit more on the knees bending and extending while still moving the hips through that movement because it is a squat and we do want to move both. We're going to focus a little bit more on the knees and less focus on driving those hips through, okay? So going into the split squat, it's going to be really a single leg squat. So the same muscles are working. So we're just splitting that stance, but the front leg is doing the majority of the work. The back leg's there for support, and it's going to be working a little bit, but we're really trying to focus on that front leg. So the quads are working, again, to extend that knee. Okay, they're also working to flex that hip, but mainly here is the knee movement. So we're squeezing those quads at the top, trying to pull that knee back and straighten the front leg and get that squeeze all the way through that movement, and then same as we stretch down at the bottom. The glutes, again, on that same leg are working to squeeze as we drive that hip up and through. And if you can see on this side, you can watch how his hips, they flex at the bottom and then extend through at the top, and that extension is what's using the glutes. So the glutes squeezing to create that extension at the top, and then we're just going nice, slow, and under control there. All right, next one we're going to talk about is going to be a row. So we're going to take a band here. Dylan's going to go ahead and sit down with his back facing us so you can kind of see the lat muscles here. But with the band, we're just lacing it around the feet. And for this one, a row, we're using those lat muscles, okay? And really, all the muscles of the back are working here, a little bit of the rear delts and the biceps. And those are going to be kind of our main points here. So first, looking at the lats. The lats work by pulling the upper arm behind us, okay? We're pulling those scapula together. So really, if you want to emphasize on the lats, we're going to be pulling with the elbows. So thinking elbows pull behind you. And if you focus more on the elbows, you're going to get a lot more squeeze in those lats as you pull through, keeping the chest high, the shoulders are retracted, and then we're just squeezing as hard as we can on those lats as we pull through. Now the other working part is the bicep. And a lot of people will feel a lot of fatigue in the bicep when they're doing rows because they're not leading with those elbows. If you're leading with your hands, if you're thinking about more pulling your hands in, you're going to be using a lot more of that bicep, which works to flex at the elbow. All right, so that's how we use those two different movements. And if we let a little bit more movement happen at the shoulders, we can get a little bit more work in those rear delts. Okay, so by letting the arms kind of protract, or letting the scapula, protract as we reach long, and then retract, we're going to be working those rear delts, the rhomboids, a little bit of the center of the traps, and all those upper back muscles are going to be working a little bit more through that part of the movement. Okay, so the next one we're going to do an overhead press. And we're going to do this with the bands, but you can do this movement with a dumbbell as well, or really any weight. But we're going to step in that band, and we're going to bring the arms up, loading the wrist right above the elbows. For this one, our main driver here is going to be the shoulders, okay? Again, those deltoids. And because we're in the front of the body, as we press up, those deltoids are going to contract to flex at the shoulder. We'll also notice that the arms are extending, so there are some triceps involved in this movement, but again, they're just kind of a helping muscle here. So that's going to be that part where we extend the elbow, that's the tricep, and then when we work that shoulder, it's going to be flexing at the shoulder, okay? Extending all the way up over the head, okay? And that's going to be our overhead press. The next one we're going to go into is the bicep curl. So still standing with that band. Again, you can do this with dumbbells. But again, we're just showing how this one is a single joint movement. Okay, so this is isolating the bicep. So we're going to curl up, again, flexing at that elbow, squeezing the biceps at the top, and then slowly lowering down. Again, like I showed you in the example earlier, we want to make sure there's constant contraction on that muscle. So even when we're coming down and extending through, we still want to be focusing on keeping as much tension as we can on that bicep to maximize the inefficiency of this movement, making it a little bit more challenging on that muscle, and really squeezing at the top as well. A lot of times you'll see when people do bicep curls, they'll try to bring the arms up a little bit, overextend, use their shoulders a little bit like that. But again, yes, you're getting more range of motion, but at the same time, it's not creating that same stimulus on the bicep, which is our goal here. Okay, so you want to be focusing on the muscle you're trying to work. All right, last one I really want to cover here is going to be a lateral raise. So this one's going to be working the side of the shoulder, okay, that lateral deltoid head. So for this one, we're going to show you with a band, but you can do this with a dumbbell. But we're going to step on that band, and then you're going to bring that arm up to the side and then bring it down nice and slow. So the longer his arm is here with that straight arm, the harder that movement's going to be, because we're creating a longer moment arm and a little bit more torque on the shoulder. So as he raises up, okay, he's going to be squeezing the top of that shoulder cap, that lateral delt head, and then slowly coming down. Again, squeezing through and focusing on that movement, bringing that arm up toward the top and then slowly coming down. All right, so again, those are our body weight movements. So again, just make sure you're focusing on contracting the muscle you're trying to work. Don't just go through the movements without intention. You know, if you're just going through, your body is going to try to make it as efficient as it can. And again, you're going to get a lot less done on the actual muscle. So focus on the muscle, all right? Keep the mind in it, all right? And work with intention. All right, guys? So hope this helped. If you have questions, ask them. And we'll see you soon.
Bye.